Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of My Thoughts, and it's been a while since I've gotten to say that. This edition of audio-only vlog sort of things has been brought to you by the fact that I am unable to film regular videos due to the outbreak of human malware. Since the season just ended, I wanted to talk about the first season of Star Trek Picard. Right out of the gate, it was utterly fantastic. As both a sequel to The Next Generation and an entirely new series, it was perfect. The performances were great, the story was great, and everything was just great. But you probably want some more detail. Obviously, spoilers ahead, this is a review, you ought to expect that. As I've stated earlier, I was pretty much all in on the concept right from the get-go, because TNG was my first exposure to Star Trek, so if you give me Picard and Riker and Data and Troy, I'm already sold. But to give this utterly amazing story that not only bridges the gap between the show I love and this new show, but creates so many new story opportunities for the Star Trek universe to take. My biggest issue with Star Trek since Voyager ended is that everything feels like a step backwards. Enterprise was a prequel, the J.J. Abrams reboot took place during Kirk's era, and then Discovery is a midquel. Picard was our first glimpse at Star Trek's future outside of non-canon sources like novels, comics, and the Star Trek Online video game. And it was well worth the wait. I was on the edge of my seat every week and found each episode to be even better than the last. I never once left an episode feeling anything less than amazed, which is more than I can say for a lot of shows I've been watching lately. More importantly, unlike Discovery, the people behind this show clearly love The Next Generation as much as I do. They clearly love Picard and the rich world he came from. I watched all the after shows, despite my rule usually being to ignore them, because Will Wheaton was hosting, but those interviews and behind-the-scenes featurettes convinced me that Chabon and everyone on the team was serious about being the stewards of the legacy of The Next Generation. Nothing we saw on this show was any different than what we saw on Deep Space Nine, what we saw in the Next Generation films, hell, what we saw in the Next Generation proper. There are no good Starfleet admirals, and there never have been, and there never will be, and the reason that Clancy is so obtuse and evil, practically, is that we're supposed to hate her and love Picard. And they succeeded at that. Discovery felt to me, and was proven to me by their after show, After Trek, to be their version of Star Trek. They made the uniforms and tech different because that's what they wanted to do, ignoring the universe that they were given. Picard takes what we saw on screen, updates the visuals due to the time shift between The Next Generation and the new show, and creates a rich new world for Picard to inhabit. The new characters are also very interesting. Daj and Soji, Raffi, Rios, Jurati, Elnor, they all have unique journeys that perfectly complement Picard's. Were they all developed as well as they could have been? No, but I enjoyed their journeys and want to see where they go from here, especially given how the season ended. It is a strange new world, and I'm ready to see them boldly go into it. And for the returning characters, it was great. I mean, it wasn't a great show to be a TNG guest star in, but it was a great show, especially when what they did with 7 of 9, because the one problem with Voyager is that it ended the moment they got home, and there was a lot for 7 of 9 that we didn't get to see, that we wanted to see but never got to see, and I think they finally made 7 of 9 matter in a way that I think Voyager failed to do, due to the fact that they just insisted on making her the main character through a good chunk of her seasons, and in this, it truly feels like not only is she part of the ensemble, but she is just this fully fledged new character that Voyager never could have given us. And I was very happy with what they did with 7 of 9. And I loved all the other characters. Rios was great. It was great to see, Rios was kind of like the sort of rogue that they wanted Okana to be, and utterly failed at making him. And Raffi was great. I mean, I loved the actress on Ash vs. Evil Dead, but she really came into her own as Raffi in this show. And Jurati was done phenomenally. Just the way that, it seemed like they were really going to making her, the Tilly of the show. And as much as I love Tilly, we don't need Tilly on every single Star Trek show. And I was very happy with the direction they took her in, and sort of developed her further than just being Tilly Part 2. Elnor was great. It was very interesting because he is one of the rare warriors in Star Trek that isn't just the normal Klingon warrior. It was very interesting to see Elnor's story, especially given how he was basically the son Picard never had, and never will have, because I'm pretty sure he's not that fully functional in his old age. That's a spoiler if you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, you'll figure it out. Daj and Soji, the twins, that was great. I loved what they did with that, especially with Soji's interactions with Narek. And I think that was done phenomenally well. I very much am interested to see where they all go from here. As I said, it's a strange new world, and I'm ready to see them boldly go into it. What struck me the most, I think, was the fact that, and this is a major spoiler, so turn back now, they let Data die. It didn't reverse Data's death like so many non-canon sources had done. Star Trek Online, reverse Data's death. The books, reverse Data's death. The autobiography of Jean-Luc Picard, reversed Data's death in a very poor way. And I'm happy that they didn't do the same thing here. Did I disagree with Data's death? Yes, but it was a good death, and it proved that there were far more interesting stories to tell with Data dead than with Data alive. And if you want a living Data, check out the TNG relaunch novels, because they do great work with that exact premise. In particular, David Mack's Cold Equations trilogy. I'm about halfway through the second book right now, and I'm loving it. And they gave Brent Spiner the graceful exit in the show that Nemesis had neglected to give him. I felt more emotion for a 20-year-old movie during the finale of Picard than I did when I actually watched that movie, both the first time and rewatching it a couple weeks ago. They also did great with the balance between fan service and new stuff. Yes, of course, the fans, like me, want to see Riker and Troy and the Enterprise crew back together, but the show can't just be the Next Generation reunion, and they succeeded in giving us clever nods to the past without bogging the show down with unnecessary canon. A lot of the books, it requires you to know minutia, and obviously if you're reading the books, you already know it. The show, not necessarily, and I think I really liked all the stuff involved with the Riker-Troy family, especially with the names of the kids. Another spoiler coming up, they have a daughter named Kestra, which is a reference to Deanna Troy's dead sister from Dark Page, Season 7 of Next Gen, and Thaddeus Riker, which is a reference to Riker's ancestor Thaddeus, who fought in the Civil War, and that was a major plot point in the Voyager episode Death Wish, the one where the Q wanted to commit suicide and John Delancey wouldn't let him. And it was a great balance between fan service and new stuff, because it gave me stuff I'd always wanted to see, stuff I desperately wanted to see. Captain Riker again, and I was very satisfied with what they did with him, especially, and another spoiler, his appearance in the finale, which was phenomenal. And there are a lot of people out there who have criticized it. I saw this article in The Guardian, or on The Guardian's website, that criticized it for being too dark and not being as light and hopeful as TNG was, and I think I disagree with that, because for one thing, this darker, action-oriented style was the style that was used the last time we saw Picard on screen, with the exception of Generations, which was some weird mixture of comedy, and then Geordi got tortured by the Romulans. The other three Next Generation movies were action flicks, with each one featuring, with the middle one, Insurrection, featuring a Starfleet conspiracy, and an admiral working with the villains. Though, in my humble opinion, Picard handles that plot way better than Insurrection ever could have. I'm actually, I know that firmly because I read Michael Pillar's Fade In book about the making of the movie. I'm going to do a video on that at some point because it is fascinating. That movie was never going to work. But this isn't an insert. I'll save that for the video on the book. And I think a lot of people who criticize it are forgetting that Roddenberry's idealistic future mandate is what made the first 2 seasons of The Next Generation absolute garbage. One of the best Season 3 episodes was because Michael Piller and the crew took Roddenberry's mandate and they had to work around it, and they subverted it, and that's what made the episode good. If everything is rosy and happy in the future, and the characters don't have problems with each other or themselves, the show is boring. And while I agree that the show leaned too heavily into violence, that's unfortunately a necessity from a storytelling perspective, and as a screenwriter I know this, because if you didn't watch Voyager, why should you give one iota about, another spoiler, Icheb's death? This show has to be accessible to new people, so we have to see the violence and then see Seven's reaction to it to get the guttural feeling that you get if you're a fan and you know who Icheb was and you cared about him maybe. I personally was kind of happy to see him go because the actor who played him in the show turned out to be a complete asshole. So, not bad. And as for Picard being a show without hope, I think it's hopeful. It's sort of like what SF Debris had said years ago about Red Dwarf. It has a more optimistic message than Star Trek, because you have the everyman fighting against adversity to better himself, as opposed to Star Trek, where everyone is already bettered, because we evolved past petty squabbles or whatever. We're shown that these normal people, these normal broken people, Rios, Raffi, Picard, Elnor, Jurati, they're not the uber smart and talented cream of the crop we got in The Next Generation. These are real, normal, regular people with real issues who still manage to come out and do the right thing for the right reasons, fighting against everyone who tells them that they should give up. The Zat Vash, the Starfleet Admiralty, the Federation in general. They stood up for their values, and they won. That seems pretty hopeful to me, considering that there are people in the here and now doing that exact same thing. We might lose, we might not have hope, but Picard's people won, and to me, that's a very hopeful message. So The Next Generation was my first Star Trek show, the one that made me a fan, and nothing in Picard feels wrong to me. You might disagree with me. I think that Picard was done well. I stomached Discovery through the bad parts because it needed to do well enough to A, become a better show, which Season 2 definitely made strides in. I'm hoping Season 3 is phenomenal. And B, to convince CBS to bring Star Trek back into the post-Nemesis era. It was only because Discovery did as well as it did that allowed CBS to bring on Michael Chabon and to convince Patrick Stewart to come back. He was convinced that there was a good story to tell. I knew he wouldn't come back if it wasn't going to be good, and I was completely proven correct. And I think Picard was just a great show, and I think it succeeded at doing what it needed to do, and I'm very excited to see where Season 2 will take the crew from here. Those were my thoughts on Star Trek Picard Season 1, and I will see you in the next video. See you next time. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed that video, be sure to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date on the channel. And if you'd like, you can also find my videos on any of these fine websites. And if you want to help out the channel, you can support us on Patreon. See you next time.